So let's talk about visual sensation, basically the parts of the eye and how they function, and then how they connect to your central nervous system or the brain through the optic nerve. If we look and think about what is the distal stimulus, and when we say the distal stimulus, that is the outside. So think distance. It's the outside stimulus that's coming in. Sensation is the physical and actual sensory neurons that are lighting up when they come into the brain. So in the case of vision, you're not actually seeing the things that you're seeing. Instead, you're seeing light waves bouncing or reflecting off of the things that you're seeing. Sometimes that's a hard concept to understand. As those light waves bump or bounce into your eye functions in order to translate that message into a message that the brain can understand. Your brain can only understand neural impulses. It can't understand light waves. So you have to actually kind of translate it. The amplitude of a light wave as it comes in is going to dictate the brightness of that light. The wavelength is the distance between the two peaks is going to dictate the color. So what color you perceive. Now, we'll talk about color when we do visual perception and how that actually is more of a construct and how we've been told what color is. Whether you see a bright red or kind of a deep or rusty red has to do with the purity of the light waves as they come in. Generally speaking, you're not only getting a single red light wave that comes in. Instead, you're getting a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow perhaps, with black being the absence of light waves and white being all of the light waves together. There's a lot of variation in the shade or the hue of a color as it comes in. As humans, we actually see a relatively small spectrum of visible light. This little spot right here in between, that's our tiny little spectrum. Even though we see a ton of colors, this tiny little spectrum is the actual visible light that we as humans see. Fun fact, reptiles see infrared light and insects see ultraviolet light. Think about why they're attracted to those ultraviolet bug zappers. Okay, let's look at the eye. We'll start kind of on the outside. If you look at these muscles, the inferior rectus and the superior rectus muscles and tendons, basically, that we have on the outside, you have so many muscles and so many tendons and so many blood vessels working in your eyes. It's actually incredibly complex. But these muscles on the outsides are what allow you to be able to go like this and to move your actual eyeball up and down and right and left. The eye itself is remarkably spherical, so it's very, very round, unless you have astigmatism, which some of you may have been told that by your eye doctor, but you don't know exactly what it is, where your eye is actually more of an oval shape or a football shape rather than the nice round. Going to probably affect your lens's ability to change shape, so some of your focus and ability to see clearly, but also it's going to affect whether or not you can wear contact lenses, because they're designed for this nice round, to sit on this nice round eye and over this dome that's the cornea, and not on a kind of longer football type shape lens or football shape eyeball. Okay, we'll start in the front and kind of work our way back. The very front, this dome, it's a clear dome that sits over, and then there's a flap here with the conjunctiva and the cornea. But this is the cornea. It's got two main jobs. First of all, it's to keep out debris out of your very, very sensitive iris muscle tissue, and then the hole that is the pupil. The second job, and you can be technically legally blind with having problems with your cornea. The reason for this is not because you wouldn't see anything, like you wouldn't see light or shapes, but the cornea's job is the first line of being able to focus light in the direction that it needs to. So it's this nice dome shape so that it can take all the light and put it right into the middle, which is really, really important in the eye. Next you have, and we'll go back down here, so the cornea, these external parts, you have the conjunctiva and the sclera. Your conjunctiva is the clear membrane that goes all the way around the outside of your eye. Again, two jobs: keep out debris and keep your eye in shape. So in the nice round spherical shape, because the majority of your eye is actually kind of gelatinous or fluid. This flap in between the cornea and the conjunctiva, if anybody's ever heard of conjunctivitis or pink eye, is debris can actually get under here. This is also, you can actually, and this is going to get gross here for a second, you can open up this flap of the cornea to get at the lens or even push that back and getting at the retina. That's how they do things like cataract surgery or LASIK surgery, by opening up this flap. But because there's a flap there, stuff can get underneath there. So bloodshot eyes, conjunctivitis, pink eye, debris, infection can really get those blood vessels that are running through really sensitive. The sclera is the white part of the eye. It's the kind of gelatinous, full of collagen, keeps that eye fluid and keeps it allows the tendons and the blood vessels to run through it. When you get inflammation, so conjunctivitis or even certain drugs that inflame the blood vessels, you get bloodshot eyes. What's happening is those blood vessels are actually getting bigger and they're working their way through this gelatinous fluid. And so they get closer to that clear surface, that conjunctiva, in order for you to be able to see them on the outside. Okay, working our way in is the iris. And in class, we'll kind of try and take pictures of the iris so you can see it. The color of the iris, so it's the colored part of the eye, is genetic. Lighter eyes being recessive, darker eyes being dominant because they're more protected from the sun. You have genetic components usually based on what region your heritage comes from. And the more exposure to light, usually closer to things like the equator, the darker, generally speaking, those eyes become. Light eyes are actually starting to go away, and they believe it might be because of global warming and the more direct sunlight that we see these days, because the darker the eye, the more protective it is. The lighter the eye, the more sensitive it is to sun, and you can actually sunburn it. You can tan it in the summertime. But what it is smooth muscle tissue. This is the only smooth muscle tissue. You can actually see the striations, the muscle fibers on the outside. So you can see all those tiny little stripes. Those are actually muscle fibers because it's a muscle. Its job is to move, and it is to open and close the pupil. That being said, that pupil is literally a hole. If I were to put a pin directly through the middle of your eye, it would actually be okay. Now, would it cause a scar on the cornea? Would it cause a scar on the lens? Yes, but it would not actually pop the eye. It would ooze or anything like that because it's a hole. The reason you need a hole is because you need the lens to receive this light and be able to flip it all the way onto the back of the eye. So all the way onto the retina, which is in the back. The lens, think about this just like a contact lens, but it is inside your eyeball, is constantly changing shape and angle because its job, and its critical job, is to focus the image. So think about the lens and think about two things: focusing the image and flipping the image. So its job is to focus the image directly on the back of the eye, which those of you that have farsighted and nearsighted, this is the thing that's going wrong. But it's also to flip the image, because that's optics. It flips the image so you actually see upside down first. It's your brain that flips the image back over. Then that image goes directly onto the back. So the entire back of the eye, that inner membrane, is the retina, which is where transduction happens. Transduction being the transfer of energy. In this case, a distal stimulus of light waves needs to be transferred or translated into a neural impulse. Every single one of your senses has a location where transduction happens and has cells that make it happen. In this case, it's the retina where it happens, so the whole back of the eye, and the cells that make it happen are the rods and the cones. We'll talk about those more in the next video. But the rods and the cones then turn that into an activated, so they're activated by certain types of light, feature detection, and that turns that image that light wave into a message for your brain, a neural impulse. And then those sensory neurons take that impulse or that message down your optic nerve into your central nervous system. And that's the eye.